how harsh language destroys relationships. I'll never forget the sound of that door slamming. It wasn't the loudest noise I'd ever heard, but it hit me in a place no punch ever could. My son, 15, tall, proud, carrying my stubborn streak in his jaw, looked me in the eye one last time before locking himself in his room. I had just said something. I don't remember the exact words, but I remember how it felt coming out. Sharp, meant to sting, like I wanted to win an argument I shouldn't have been fighting in the first place. That was the night I realized I'd become my father. You know the type. Gruff. No nonsense. Thought love was something you earned, not something you gave freely. He was a man of his time, sure, but his words could cut through steel. I swore I'd never be like him. And yet, there I was, throwing words like grenades at the people I loved most. I don't know when I started using words as weapons. Maybe it was easier than admitting I was scared. Scared of being vulnerable. Scared of not being respected. Scared of losing control. But the truth? I was already losing everything that mattered, and I didn't even know it. That night, sitting outside my son's door, I started to understand that being right doesn't matter when you're being cruel. And no one teaches you how to take back what you said when the damage is already done. But this story isn't just about that night. It's about the slow, quiet unraveling of relationships, and how it always starts with a word. Let me take you back to where it really began. Before the slammed door. Before the silence. Before I knew the damage I was capable of. It always starts small. That's the part no one tells you. A joke at someone's expense during dinner. A sarcastic nice job when your kid messes up. A jab at your wife in front of friends. Meant to be funny, but laced with something darker. And then you watch their face change. Just for a second. A flicker in the eyes. A tight smile that doesn't reach the soul. But you tell yourself they're overreacting. You're just being honest. You're not yelling, you're not hitting, you're just talking. I was good at that. I told myself I wasn't like the guys who lost their tempers. I wasn't abusive. I was just straightforward. Blunt. A realist. What a load of crap. What I really was afraid of being soft. Soft meant weak. And growing up, weak men got walked all over. So I sharpened my tongue into a blade and convinced myself that being feared was better than being dismissed. But there's a cost. A long-term one. The kind that creeps in slowly. Like rust. First, they push back. They argue. They fight. Then they stop. That's when it gets dangerous. Because silence? That's not peace. That's surrender. That's the moment they decide you're not safe anymore. And when the people closest to you stop trusting your words, everything else starts to fall apart too. I didn't see it clearly until years later, but the damage was already done. And it was my own damn mouth that did it. Next, I'll tell you about the first real fight that shook my marriage. The one I can't forget no matter how hard I try. We were in the kitchen. I don't even remember what started the argument. Something stupid, like who forgot to pick up milk. But the way I responded, that I remember, I raised my voice. Not shouting, not screaming, but enough. Enough to make my wife stop mid-sentence. Enough to make her take a small step back. Barely noticeable. But I noticed. She flinched. Not like she thought I'd hit her. I've never raised a hand to her, never would. But it was the kind of flinch that says I don't know what version of you I'm gonna get right now. And God, that wrecked me. Not in the moment, no, in the moment I doubled down. Said something about how maybe if she actually listened. Or maybe if she stopped nagging me like a child. You know, classic deflection. Cruel, polished lines. Practiced. Defensive. Toxic. She didn't say anything. Just picked up a dish towel, wiped the counter like I wasn't there, and left the room. And I stood there, boiling with some kind of victory that tasted like ash. That's when it hit me. This wasn't love anymore. This was survival. Two people walking on eggshells in their own home, terrified of the next verbal landmine. That moment, her flinch, is one of the clearest memories I have. Because that was the first time I realized I wasn't just angry. I was dangerous. Not in a physical sense. Worse, maybe. I could destroy someone's spirit with a sentence. And the worst part? I had learned to be proud of that skill. Next, I'll show you where I learned it. where it all started, the house I grew up in, and the man who taught me that silence and sarcasm are sharper than knives. I grew up in a house where the quiet was loud. My old man didn't yell. He didn't need to. One sentence from him could make your stomach twist into knots. He had a way of delivering disappointment like a verdict, cold, final, and laced with contempt. You really thought that was a good idea? I expected more from you. Try using your brain next time. Never a raised hand. Just raised eyebrows. Just enough sarcasm to make you feel like a fool for even trying. And God help you if you showed emotion. Crying was weakness. Talking back was disrespect. If you wanted affection, you were soft. If you needed encouragement, you were needy. So I learned to bottle everything up until pressure made me sharp. I learned that whoever speaks last wins. That silence could starve someone more than shouting ever could. And I carried that poison into every relationship I had. You think you're escaping your childhood, but you're not. You're just repeating it in new colors. I swore I'd never be like him. But by the time I was 35, I had his tone, his expressions, his damn smirk when someone made a mistake. I was doing it to my wife, to my son, to my friends. And worst of all, I didn't even notice until it was too late. What I thought was strength, being tough, being real, was just fear dressed up as masculinity. Next, I'll tell you about the first friendship I lost because of my mouth. A guy who stood by me through everything, until one day he just didn't. His name was Eric. We met in college, bonded over broken homes, cheap beer, and the kind of loyalty you don't question. He was the guy who showed up when no one else did, helped me move, stood next to me at my wedding, even held my kid the day he was born. He was family even if we didn't share blood. But I took him for granted. See, when you grow up guarded, even your closest friends don't get the whole you. They get sarcasm. They get jokes. They get the version of you that keeps things light, even when things are falling apart. And when they try to go deeper, you cut them down before they get too close. That's what I did to Eric. Over and over. He'd open up about something. His dad dying, his anxiety, a rough patch in his marriage, and I'd make a joke. Tell him to man up. Call it just life. But the moment that broke it, we were at a bar. He told me he was thinking about therapy, said he didn't like who he was becoming, that he felt numb. And I laughed. Not hard, not cruel. Just enough to make him feel small. Jesus, man. I said, you gonna start journaling too? He didn't respond. He just stared at me for a long time, then nodded like he finally saw who I really was. He paid his tab, clapped me on the shoulder and said, you know, not everything's a damn joke, Mike. That was the last time we talked. I texted, called, nothing. At first I was pissed, told myself he was too sensitive. But deep down I knew the truth. He wasn't the one who changed. He just stopped tolerating me. That loss stayed with me, not because I missed having someone to drink with, but because for the first time someone I loved walked away because of who I was, not in spite of it. Next, I'll tell you about how it started showing up in my marriage, the slow death of affection, and the night I realized my wife didn't look at me the same anymore. There was a time when my wife looked at me like I was her whole world. You know what I mean, that soft glance across the room, the small smirk when I said something stupid but tried to be charming, the kind of eye contact that made you feel like you were seen, like really seen. And then one day it was gone. No fight, no screaming match, just gone. Like a light bulb that quietly burns out while you're not looking. I didn't notice it right away. I thought we were just busy. The kid, the bills, work stress, the usual excuses. But it was the little things. She stopped asking me how my day was, stopped reaching for my hand during movies, stopped laughing at my jokes, not even the fake laugh wives give out of loyalty. And I started noticing a look in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not anger, not even sadness, just exhaustion. Not the kind from lack of sleep, the kind from carrying the emotional weight of a man who doesn't even realize he's heavy. I asked her once, half joking, you sick of me or something? She smiled, flat, polite, and said, no, I'm just tired. But it wasn't her body that was tired. It was her spirit. And I couldn't blame her. I had spent years being sharp, guarded, dismissive, acting like vulnerability was weakness, like I was the only one allowed to hurt, and everyone else just had to deal with it. I wanted her attention, her affection, her loyalty, but I gave her none of the things that earned it. And the night it really sank in, we were lying in bed, backs turned to each other. No good night, no touch, no words. Felt like sleeping next to a ghost. But I was the one who killed what used to live there. Next, I'll tell you about the time my son started mirroring my behavior, and I saw, for the first time, the man he might become if I didn't change. And it scared the hell out of me. He was 10 the first time I heard him talk to someone the way I talked to his mother. We were in the backyard. He and his cousin were building something out of scrap wood, some kind of fort they were excited about. And then his cousin dropped a piece, cracked it. My boy didn't miss a beat. Nice going, genius. You ever think before you do anything? The words hit me like a punch to the ribs, because those were my words, my cadence, my tone, delivered cold, with just enough sarcasm to cut skin. His cousin looked down, embarrassed, said nothing. My son turned back to the pile, proud of himself for winning, and I just stood there. I didn't correct him, didn't explain why it was wrong. I froze, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I suddenly saw myself, not in a mirror, in him. It was like someone shoved a camera into my face and hit play on the worst moments of my life. All the times I'd snapped at his mom. All the sighs, the rolled eyes, the little dismissals. The sarcasm I thought was just how I talk. He had been watching, learning, absorbing, and now here he was copying me. Not in the ways I hoped. Not my work ethic, not my loyalty, not my sense of humor. He was learning how to wound. And the thing that gutted me most? He didn't even realize it was wrong. Because to him, that's just how men speak when they want to be heard. That night, I sat on the edge of his bed while he slept, staring at his little chest rising and falling. And I made a quiet promise to myself. If I don't change, he's going to grow up into a man who breaks people and calls it strength. Next, I'll tell you about the breaking point. The day my wife finally told me she was done trying to reach me. And the one sentence that shattered everything I thought I knew about myself. It was a Tuesday. Funny how the worst moments in your life don't wait for a dramatic setup. They just show up on an ordinary day and burn everything down. I came home from work, late again. My wife was in the kitchen, back turned, arms crossed. I knew that posture. I'd seen it 100 times. And like every other time, I was ready with my usual defense. A half apology, a joke, maybe some fake frustration to shift the blame. But she didn't say a word, just stood there. I dropped my keys, opened the fridge, asked if we were eating tonight. My tone? Sharp, tired, defensive before there was even an attack. She turned slowly, looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize anymore, and said, "You make this house feel unsafe." I laughed, a bitter, confused laugh. Unsafe? What the hell are you talking about? I've never laid a hand on you. She didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice. She just repeated it. It's not your hands I'm afraid of. It's your words. And man, that hit like a car crash. Because in that moment, I couldn't deny it. I couldn't minimize it. She wasn't being dramatic. She wasn't twisting things. She was finally telling the truth, and I knew it. I wanted to argue, to say she was being unfair, that she was too sensitive. But all I could do was stand there, heart racing, jaw clenched, because deep down I knew. I knew what it felt like to walk on eggshells. I knew what it meant to dread coming home. I had just never imagined I could be the reason someone else felt that way. She didn't cry. She didn't threaten to leave. She just said she was done begging me to care. And then she left the room, quietly, like someone giving up, not giving in. I stood there for a long time, still, silent. For once in my life, no words, because the one sentence that mattered had already been said. Next, I'll tell you about what happened after that. The silence that followed, the space between us growing colder, and the night I realized I might lose my family if I didn't face what I had become. The thing no one tells you about emotional damage is that it doesn't explode, it erodes. After that night, things didn't blow up. There were no ultimatums, no packed bags, no dramatic exits, just silence, the kind that fills every room, the kind that hums under the surface like a low, constant threat. She stopped talking unless it was about logistics, dinner, the kids' schedule, bills. Her voice was flat, her eyes dull, like she'd shut down something inside her to survive living with me. And I kept telling myself, at least she's still here. But deep down, I knew she wasn't. Not really. My son picked up on it, too. He tiptoed around conversations, spent more time in his room, started answering my questions with shrugs or one-word replies. And I started waking up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, soaked in sweat, regretting everything I didn't say, regretting everything I had said. But I didn't know how to fix it. Because here's the thing. When your words have been weapons for years, no one believes you when you suddenly put them down and say, "I'm sorry." They flinch anyway. They brace for impact. They assume the apology is just a setup for the next hit. And maybe they're right. I remember sitting on the couch one night, TV on but not watching, while my wife quietly folded laundry. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words just sat in my throat like lead. So I asked, "Are we okay?" She paused, folded a towel, didn't look at me. Then she said, "We haven't been okay in years. You just didn't notice." I didn't sleep that night, not because of guilt, because of fear. For the first time, I understood. I might not get another chance to fix this. Next, I'll take you into the hardest part of the story. The night I finally broke down and admitted I needed help. Not just to her, but to myself. I was alone in the garage, not drinking, not yelling, just sitting, hands locked together, elbows on my knees, staring at the concrete floor like it might offer an answer. It was after midnight. My wife had gone to bed hours ago, or at least pretended to. We hadn't said goodnight in months. I don't know what triggered it. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the echo of my son's door clicking shut again that evening, same as the week before. Maybe it was just the weight of years finally pressing down. But something inside me cracked. I cried. Not the quiet kind, not the tough guy single tear. No, full body shaking, gut-wrenching, nose-running crying. The kind I hadn't done since I was a kid hiding from my father's disappointment. And in the middle of that storm, one thought hit me harder than anything. I don't know how to love without hurting people. That broke me, because it wasn't just about them anymore. It was about me, about the man I had become. I had spent my whole life trying to be strong, and all I had to show for it was a scared wife, a distant son, and a garage full of tools no one wanted to share time with me in. I wanted to fix it, but I didn't know where to begin. So I did something I swore I never would. I picked up my phone, found the name of a guy from work. Divorced, rough around the edges, but I remembered him mentioning therapy once. And I texted, "Hey, you said therapy helped you. Mind telling me where you went?" That was it. The smallest step, the hardest step, the most honest step I'd ever taken. Because the truth is, admitting you've been the villain in your own family's story is brutal. But pretending you haven't, that's worse. Next, I'll tell you what it felt like to sit in that first therapy session, to finally hear from someone else's mouth that the way I spoke, the way I was, had a name. And it wasn't strength. I sat in the therapist's office like I was waiting for a damn firing squad. Arms crossed, guard up, every muscle tight. I told myself I didn't need this, that I was doing it for my wife, for my kid, just to show I'm trying. But the truth? I was terrified. She didn't rush, just let the silence hang in the air, like she was waiting for me to make the first move. And eventually I did what I always do. I made a joke. "I guess I'm here so you can tell me I'm broken." She didn't laugh, didn't even smile. She just looked at me and said, "No, you're not broken. You're just armored. And the people around you are bleeding from the edges of your armor." That hit like a gut punch, because no one had ever said it like that. I always thought of myself as protective, tough, blunt because I care. But what I really was armored, covered in layers of sarcasm, control, and emotional distance. And every time someone got close, they got cut. She asked me about my childhood, about my father, about what love looked like growing up. And that's when I realized I'd never seen gentle love up close, only transactional love, earned love, the kind where affection had a price and silence was the currency of respect. She said, "You learned to survive, but now it's costing you connection." And she was right. I wasn't abusive. I wasn't evil. But I was unsafe, emotionally, mentally, relationally. I thought strength meant never being vulnerable. Now I was learning that true strength might mean sitting across from a stranger, unarmed, and finally telling the truth. Next, I'll take you through the hardest apology I ever gave. Not to my wife, not even to my son, but to myself. There's a moment in therapy, if you stick with it long enough, where you stop talking about them. Not your wife, not your father, not your kid, not the friends who left. You start talking about you, the boy you were, the man you became, the damage you caused and the damage that was done to you. And that's where I broke again. It wasn't in a dramatic way. No tears this time, just a slow collapse, like a house that had been rotting from the inside finally giving out. I said something I hadn't ever said out loud. I don't think I've ever liked myself. Not really. I liked how people feared me, respected me, deferred to me. I liked being in control. I liked being the guy who always said what others were thinking. But deep down, I hated the silence after my words landed. I hated the look in my wife's eyes. I hated the cold distance with my son. And more than anything, I hated knowing I was responsible for it. I had spent my entire life trying to be the opposite of weak. But I had become the thing I feared most, lonely. So my therapist asked me to do something that felt stupid at first. She told me to go home, look in the mirror, and say, "I forgive you. You didn't know better then. But you do now." I stood in the bathroom that night, heart pounding, palms sweating. Tried to look myself in the eye. Took me 10 minutes just to get the words out. But when I did, whispered, shaky, something in me shifted. I wasn't free. I wasn't healed. But I had taken the first honest step toward both. Because real change doesn't start with apologizing to others. It starts with finally facing yourself. Next, I'll tell you how I began repairing things at home. The small gestures, the uncomfortable conversations, and the long road back to earning trust one had shattered. You don't fix years of damage with a bouquet of flowers. You don't repair silence with one apology. You don't rebuild trust by saying you've changed. You show it brick by brick, day by day, without asking for applause. I started small. I began listening, really listening. Not to respond, not to defend, just to understand. When my wife spoke, I didn't interrupt. I didn't correct. I didn't twist her words into an argument. I let them land, even when they stung. I asked my son about his day, not to check a box, but to be present. I watched his eyes to see if he believed I cared. Some days he shrugged. Some days he mumbled. But I stayed. Consistent. Calm. Not pushing. And I started doing something that felt foreign at first. I told them how I felt. "I missed you today. I'm proud of you. I was wrong yesterday. I'm sorry." No dramatic speeches. No grand gestures. Just truth. There was one night, maybe 3 months in, where I came home and found my wife waiting up for me. No tension in the air. Just her. Wrapped in a blanket, soft eyes, tired smile. "I noticed," she said. "You're different." That broke me in the best way. Not because I was back in, but because I realized she saw the effort, not just the history. And slowly, my son started sitting next to me on the couch again. He'd lean in when we talked. He'd ask questions. He'd laugh. Do you know what it feels like to earn back a child's laugh? It's holy. I wasn't healed. We weren't perfect. But something had shifted. They were no longer protecting themselves from me. They were starting to feel safe with me. Next, I'll share the moment I knew I had truly changed. Not when I got it right, but when I got it wrong. And didn't run from it. It happened on a Sunday. We were running late for a family lunch, the kind of thing that used to send me into a tailspin. Stress, traffic, misplaced keys, all the ingredients for one of my classic blow-ups. My wife was in the hallway, frustrated. My son was dragging his feet, complaining about shoes. I could feel it, the old heat rising in my chest, that tightness in my throat, the urge to snap, to control, to fire off a biting remark and make everyone else scramble. But I didn't. Instead, I took a breath, closed my eyes for a second, and said, "It's okay. We'll get there when we get there." And then it happened. My wife turned to me, sharp from the stress, and said, "You know, if you didn't take forever getting ready, we wouldn't be late." Old me would have exploded, mocked her, got defensive, made it about her tone instead of my own behavior. But I didn't. I nodded. "You're right. I'll be quicker next time." And I meant it. She blinked, taken off guard, then just softened. My son looked up at me, surprised, maybe even a little impressed. And in that quiet moment, I realized this wasn't about being perfect. It was about being safe, being steady, being someone they didn't have to tiptoe around anymore. I didn't win the moment. I didn't need to, because I'd finally learned that in a family, no one wins when someone has to lose. That was the day I knew the change had stuck. Not because I avoided conflict, but because I walked through it differently. Next, I'll share the last part of this story, not a clean ending, but the truth of what comes after the apology, the therapy, the healing. There's no dramatic ending to this story. No perfect family photo. No Hollywood reunion where everything clicks back into place. Because real healing doesn't look like a straight line. It looks like slow, steady progress with days where you slip and choose to stand back up anyway. Some mornings, I still feel that old fire rising, the urge to dominate a conversation, to correct, to win. But now, I notice it, and that's the difference. Now, I choose words that build instead of break. I choose to pause instead of react. I choose to sit with discomfort instead of silencing it with sarcasm. My wife still has scars. So does my son. So do I. But we talk about them now. We don't pretend anymore. The other night, my son asked if I could help him with something for school. And I swear to God, it was the way he said it. Like he wanted to talk to me. Like I was safe again. And my wife, some nights she reaches for my hand without thinking. That simple touch, casual, instinctive, means more than any grand apology ever could. I'm still learning. Still unpacking the armor I wore for decades. Still showing up every day to earn back trust, laughter, warmth. I used to think words were power. Now I know words are responsibility. And if this story means anything, if you've seen even a piece of yourself in it, let it be this. It's not too late to change. But the change has to start with the man in the mirror. Not with what you say, but with what you do next.